Welcome back to an episode of the Butterfly Throne Podcast, episode 9. On this live or on this video, I'm going to talk about the recap of Wrestlemania, the Raw after Wrestlemania, as well as the SmackDown after Wrestlemania, and everything in between that happened so far this week. And I know most people be like, why didn't you just do a SmackDown, WrestleMania recap right after it? Why you didn't do a Raw or SmackDown recap? And I feel like I always say that I'm not doing the podcast on a weekly basis, more like whenever I feel like it, whenever the mood is right, type of thing. And because being a podcast host is a full time job, nevertheless. But yeah, this video is basically about the Raw, that's WrestleMania night 1 and 2, the Raw as well as the SmackDown. So let's get right into it, shall we? We're gonna talk about WrestleMania Night 1. WrestleMania Night 1 started off with the Usos and LA Knight versus Division and I Show Speed. Now, y'all know I can't stand Logan Paul, but it was a decent match. You know what I mean? It was a decent match. You had the Usos who came out first, followed by the Vision. Uh, the Vision and the Blues into the Usos and LA Knight, um, which led Logan Paul to turn on I Show Speed. Eventually beating up I Show Speed, LA Knight and the Usos came back into the ring to help I Show Speed, um, which mostly LA Knight to begin with. Basically beating up Logan Paul outside the ring to the point where he had him on the table, and they convinced I Show Speed to have capture his WrestleMania moment, which was to get on top of the turnbuckle and jump off the turnbuckle onto Logan Paul, who was laying out on the announcement table. Um, Good moment. I would say that's a good moment. Um, would I rate that? Normally I wouldn't. Uh, but if I have to, I would give that a 5. If I'm being honest. Um, the match in general was 5. The moment for Logan Paul getting crushed as the added bonus to me made it at 5.5. I'm being honest. Followed by Jacob Fatu versus Drew McIntyre, or AKA Drew McIntyre. Yeah, but yeah. So this match, Jacob came out in his bulletproof vest, um, basically playing into the whole thing of being in prison thing that people keep throwing into his face for some bad reason, which I think is bananas. But I digress. Um, but yeah, so it's like you have that one. Um, Drew McIntyre took a moment in the match to not only go TikTok, do a TikTok video. Basically, he did a TikTok video talking shit about Jacob or whatever the case might be. Eventually, and then used the exact same phone that he was doing a TikTok video off to hit Jacob with it while he was still doing a video. Uh, which that was kind of hilarious because he did it before, where he took a picture in the middle of a match just to mock the person. But yeah, typical Drew. But Jacob ended up winning that one. So kudos to Jacob for winning. That storyline ended it. Um, then there was those two matches with the pre-shows. The Usos and Ellen Knight versus Division I Show Speed, as well as Drew McIntyre versus Jacob Fatu were pre-show matches. Um, and then you have the actual shows, which I'm not saying that they matches not like actual show too, but still, it's the way they had it set up for the first hour leading up to the actual main show, quote unquote. Um, the main show started off with the women's fatal four-way tag team match for the women's tag team champions. Um, excuse me, where you have uh, Charlotte Flair, Alexa Bliss versus Bailey and Lyra Valkyrie versus uh, Nia Jackson Lash Legend versus what's supposed to be Nikki and Brie Bella, but Nikki got injured with the ankle or foot injury, so she couldn't do it, and so they replaced her with the returning Paige. Yes, I said Paige. She returned at WrestleMania. She had a decent sized pop. I feel like the crowd wasn't loud enough. Maybe that was just me. I'm not sure, but yeah, she had a good return, um, which was a decent match. You know, what I mean, I wasn't too thrilled, but that's just me. Um, but yeah, a decent match where it ended up for Brie and Paige to pick up the victory and become the new women's tag team champion. Honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that they put Paige in here, my guess would either for Nia Jackson Last Legend to retain the titles and or give it to Bailey or Lyra. You know what I mean? I would have probably been fine with those. You know what I mean? Does Charlotte and Lexi need it? No. Does um, Brie and Nikki would need it? I don't really care for them. Honestly, if you ever follow me on TikTok, whatever, you know I really don't give two shits about the Bellas. None whatsoever. Especially Nikki. That's just me. The match was in general was a four. You know what I mean? It is what it is. I mean, no shade to Paige. Maybe it'd probably been different if she probably helped uh AJ, but who knows? And then after that, you had the AJ versus Becky match for the women's IC champion, which again, not too much of enthusiastic of that one. Don't get me wrong, but I felt like that should have I'm sorry, but that should at least went stayed on a Raw. I'm being honest, and it's like there's no shade to AJ because I'm an AJ fan, but I feel like certain matches they should have kept. Honestly, I feel like they ever took that out, they could have easily used the SmackDown tag team champions or the tag team division to put on a good ass match to determine who will either the number one contender or who's going to be the tag team champions. I feel like they always use the tag team champions on a SmackDown or episode of Raw in a good ass match, and they should have used that for a PLE like that situation to showcase their tag division because their tag division is suffering. So, but yeah, that's just me. After that match, you had the Seth Rollins versus Gunther match, um, with Gunther winning via Braun Breaker returning. You know, basically Seth Rollins was about to win that. Basically about to curve stomp or something to Gunther, and they was setting it up. But you can tell, you could have a feeling because he was medically cleared, but they don't know when he was gonna return or whatever. And so fans are speculating online that he's either gonna return on WrestleMania or the WrestleMania, uh, the WrestleMania, no, Raw after WrestleMania. I'm sorry, I had a blank mindset. But yeah, but he ended up showing up on WrestleMania and Spirit Seth Rollins, and then having Gunther which helped Gunther win, and then after that, Spirit him again as he ran back down the ramp. So yeah, that was that one. Um, then you have the Liv and Stephanie match, and most people complain because it was a 7 minute match, in which I understand. Yeah, it should have been longer. If I'm being honest, it should have been longer. Uh, because it was a pretty good match, but then again, I also understand because it might have been where Liv and Stephanie were both injured, quote unquote. And so they didn't want to risk hurting them getting hurt worse. So I can understand that. So that's just me. So I guess this their way was to protect both women's in the match by having uh, a short match, but you had Judgment Day, Liv and sorry, not Liv, Roxanne and Raquel helping Liv in the process, so she becomes women's world champion for I think the fourth time, if I'm not mistaken. And at the end of the day, that's ugh, boring. But I digress. Nevertheless, uh, so you knew, but she was gonna win. She was gonna become a nuisance with that. What the hell? The greatest women's world champion of all time. Blah. But yeah. Um, then there was the Cody versus Randy for the WWE champion, and they had but yeah, they had the Jelly Roll and Pat McAfee interfering, which is annoying as shit. Sorry, not sorry, but I feel like my only pet peeve about this whole Randy and Cody situation was the fact it didn't need the celebrities. It didn't need the Jelly Roll. It didn't need the Pat McAfee to order to sell a good ass story, if I'm being perfectly honest. Because you have two men that's inside of a ring that has history for not only being in the same faction, but also, uh, also history of Randy not only punk kidding, punk kissing uh his father, and not only that, in one scenario where you know Randy was world heavyweight champion, and Triple H like, if you can beat Randy, then your job is safe. But if Randy pins you or beat you, then you're fired. And then Randy ended up beating him and was fired. And then not only that, it's like he was there doing the all nine Randy Orton the whole entire time. So y'all, they could have played around with it. Why the fuck did they ever put Pat McAfee in it when it was not needed? I'm sorry, but not sorry. Why was he there? He could have. It could have been without him. Sorry, not sorry. Because what do you mean that TKO felt like it was needed for the storyline to have fucking Pat McAfee? And then and then it's bad enough if Pat McAfee wasn't enough. You insert Jelly Roll to trying to be like the angel on Randy Orton's shoulder of, you don't need to do that. You're the locker room leader and shit like that. And it's kind of like, sir, excuse you, you didn't have to be in here. And I know it's TKO problem, but still, you didn't need to be in there. I'm sorry. But Randy don't need neither you or Pat McAfee in his ear. And at the end of the day, when did Randy Orton ever need somebody to speak for him? Or to be the reason why he go the fuck off the wall to begin with? Never. Randy Orton does what Randy Orton want to do. And that's why his ass got RKO'd during the match. That's why Jelly Roll ass went right through a table. No, I'll tell you what. Jelly Roll and Pat McAfee both went through the table. Then Pat McAfee came back out, got interfered, and got RKO'd by Randy Orton. Because you could tell Randy Orton wasn't happy about the whole situation of Pat McAfee being in it to begin with. He just went along with the story because his boss did it. And let's be honest, I was hoping that his ass was do that after the match, but I nevertheless. Um, doing a whole, not to rant too much, after the whole Shabbat, you had Cody winning to retain his World Heavyweight Champion, his WWE Championship. And then you had Randy, who was not satisfied with the ending, which I don't fucking blame him, to be honest. and you literally had him. He literally punt kicked Cody across the forehead, which ended up causing him an eye injury because his eye was closed shut. And so yeah, and then that was basically night one. In between moments in that, you had Bianca announcing her pregnancy, um, which I'm still going to need to catch Montez on fade with that one because it's bad enough that she was out with a finger injury for then a year. Now she's going to be needing a lot longer because of the fucking pregnancy. Even though, congratulations to both of them, but still, brother, you couldn't wait. Like we got a couple of years later so we can get another Bianca moment. Like, goddamn. You want Jimmy reading the same book of how to seduce and reproduce? Because what are we doing? And it's bad enough we had the Naomi leaving to have pregnancy, and not to say that I don't want her to have kids, but kudos. But she had left during the middle of her reign as women's world champion in the middle of a good storyline because of the pregnancy. And then it's kind of like now she had her baby, now Bianca is pregnant. It's kind of like, bruh. But it is what it is. Then there was also the Denhausen and Miz moment, which we don't care. So that was a fast forward moment. And overall, I would give night one, I'm gonna say 5. 5, but if I had to give it a bonus point, it would be because the whole I should be putting Logan Paul through the announcement table, and because of the punt kick, I would have gave it a 5.5. That's me being generous for night one. Because let's be honest, it's like a lot of people wasn't happy about it, and I was one of them. I mean, you might have some people like, "Oh, that was the best," and I'm like, "You're lying. You're lying." It was like, but it wasn't the best. You know what I mean? It was like, what the fuck is this type of moment? It is what it is. Let's go into night two. Night two kicked off with Obafemi versus Brock Lesnar with Paul Heyman. Um, over and I think this was like a 6. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was a 6 or 7 or 6 to 8 minute match with basically both of them trying to show how powerful each one of them is. If I'm being honest, which will leave Obafemi to overpower Brock, set him up with some fall for grace, and basically beat um, Brock Lesnar. And then Brock Lesnar in the middle of a ring, taking off his gloves and his shoes in the middle of a ring, thanking the fans, thanking Paul Heyman. People feeling like he retired. He just retired. I don't know if he did or he didn't, or if it's just more of a this was my last WrestleMania, so I'm hanging up these boots from WrestleMania type of thing. And who knows, maybe he would come back for SummerSlam and in his career there in his hometown. Maybe not. Who knows? It all depends. Um, but I don't know. Over for me, got a huge pop before the match and during after the match. So I mean, I'm like, kudos. This hopefully WWE can keep it up. If TKO can keep up the momentum of Open for me after this, and they don't fumble it. But we already know I'm not putting my high hopes into anything TKO or WWE. I'm being perfectly honest. Then there was the 6-man ladder match for the IC championship. Penta was putting his title on the line. You had Penta versus Javon versus JD McDonough versus Rey Mysterio versus Rusev. There was some stat match was a fucking 7.5. I'm being honest. Cause that was a good ass ladder match. I feel like now that's how you fucking do a fucking show like that. Or a match. Because you had the JD doing a Spanish fly off the ladder. You had Penta do a Penta drive on a ladder to JD. And then you had Javon doing an OG cutter on Rusev off a ladder or off the turnbuckle. Well, Rusev was on the ladder and Javon was on the turnbuckle. And they met in between. So therefore, off the ladder or something like that. But yeah, that match was a good ass match. Where Mysterio did a um some type of senton, if I'm not mistaken, onto Rusev, which ended up breaking the ladder. We thought Rusev was gonna be out for a while, but that man managed to get the fuck back up, which was beyond me. JD, brother, I'm surprised he was still walking at the end of that. But yeah, it was a great match. You know what I mean? Penta ended up retaining his IC champion, which was good for him. But him and those guys put on a damn sure good match for a mid card title. And I feel like that's how you supposed to put up with your mid card title. And not to showcase them in the way they showcased it Julia. Or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? Then those two matches, the Oba and the 6-man ladder match, was the night 2 pre-show uh, matches before the actual show, I guess. Then you had the Finn Balor, the Demon Finn Balor, versus Dominic Mysterio, which Finn got a huge pop out of that in the whole Demon perspective of him coming down to the ring from the entrance on down to the match itself. Which I gave that match again maybe a 5.7 to a 6 if I'm being generous. But overall, yeah, Finn ended up winning. So then you have the Jade versus Rhea for the women's WWE champion. You had help from Me Chan and BFAB to interfere to help Jade, with EO end up coming out to help Rhea. Honestly, I feel like this is one of Jade, if not Jade's best match so far in the company, because not only she pulled out new moves that she didn't show before, but I feel like she need to do more of this. Whatever she was doing to prepare for this match to better her craft and her in-ring skills, she need to continue that up to improve herself. So that way she could put on banger matches like that. So that way, even if down the line she decided to, reinitiate her rematch clause, if they still do rematches, and that way she can get her title back, or down the line they keep doing it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like I'm here for it. If they ever decided to initiate that. So yeah, I want that for her. Let me see what else. I gave that match, honestly, I gave it a 6. And it's kind of like, the only thing I was kind of irritated by was, it's not the fact that Jay lost. It's the fact that you could have found anybody to face Jade. And I get it that she got Charlotte in the tag team, and most of the people who would have went against Jade in the tag team, nevertheless, but still. And it's like, even though I didn't want Jade to retain, I didn't want Rhea to win either. Because Rhea is turning into the Charlotte Flair she can't stand. Where she's always in the fucking title picture, whether it's the tag team title picture or whether it's in the main event. And it's kind of like she been leeching herself, quote unquote, to EO ever since last year. Because last year she did not win in Royal Rumble or Elimination Chamber. Bianca won that. And I know I said this before in the past video. Bianca won last year Elimination Chamber. Charlotte won the Royal Rumble. And so therefore, it was Bianca's turn to face Io for the women's world champion at that time. And you have Rhea bitch and complain and moan about how she's not in it to the point where she got in it somehow. And that WrestleMania was the result of how Bianca got her finger injured. And she's been out ever since then, which is crazy work. But yet people want to boo Bianca for even stating that. So yeah, I'm like, ever since then, you've been attaching yourself to Io. Whether it's the one Evolution where you eventually face Io, Naomi cashed in on Io in a situation and became women's world champion. Then you have to do a triple threat match between Rhea, Io, and Naomi. And then eventually it's like, what the fuck are we doing? And then not so long after that, Naomi had to relinquish her title because of the pregnancy, in which they had to start back with Plan B with Stephanie. So yeah. But other than that, I feel like Rhea keep attaching herself to Io. And I don't it's like I don't get me wrong, I love Mommy, I like Mommy, but I feel like it's come to the point where my life for Rhea is starting to turn a little bit. If that makes sense. Because they keep shoving her down her throat down our throats. Pause. But still, they keep shoving her down our throats to the point where you're getting tired of it. Just like people got tired of the whole Charlotte Flair and Becky Lynch moment. Just like people got tired of the whole Roman Reigns thing. And it's kind of like, I'm tired of it. You have all these women on the divisions, and they could easily challenge it. And it's like you're not building new superstars. You keep relying on the same ones. And not to take anything away from Rhea, because I respect Rhea, but she doesn't necessarily need it. I'm just being honest. Um, but yeah, Rhea ended up beating Jade and became the new WWE Women's Champion. The next match is Trick versus Sammy, where it's for United States Champion for Sammy's United States Champion, which I still feel like they should have been a fatal 4-way match, if I'm being honest, because it should have been Trick versus Dragunov versus Mello versus Trick for the United States Champion, if I'm being honest. That would have been a banger ass match to see who would have won that match or see who would have retained. You know what I mean? I feel like that would have been a 10 out of 10 show. Not a show, but match. And I feel like they messed up. They didn't play their cards right with that. I don't know if it was Triple H idea to not do it or it was TKO's. Who knows? Maybe a little bit both. But I feel like they should have played up on it. Because you have these 4 men who was in that title picture and you could have used them like, you know what? Let's make a fatal 4-way match for the men's United States champion. Let's have Ilya Dragunov versus Mello versus Sami Zayn versus Trick for them to see who's gonna win this. They'll put on a banging ass match and there you go. That's just me. But Trick ended up winning. Trick is the new men's United States champion. He had a huge celebration with not only, I think it was Yachty, but his parents as well there. So yeah. And then you had the main events. Roman versus CM Punk. It was a good ass match as well. Both of them talking shit to each other. CM Punk taking an Olaf off a fan and basically beating Roman with it. And then them going back and forth. Roman told him he gonna make CM Punk go to sleep. And then telling his ass like, talk shit now. This ain't Twitter. You know what I mean? Shit like that. It's kind of like Roman was trolling Punk, which I'm here for. You know what I mean? And so I feel like CM Punk fate as a champion was over the minute Roman brought back his old Head of the Tables theme song, as well as the Golden Glove. It was a wrap. You know what I mean? It was a wrap. Punk days as champion was ended. Um, Roman ended up beating Punk and became the new World Heavyweight Champion on Raw. And I know a lot of fans are not happy with it because by Roman being a part time, and he committed to being a father to his kids, which I commend him. And then it's like, I also understand their perspective, but then it's like all the champions they have are basically part time. The only working champion that you have in that company was the United States champion and the women's IC champion, because those are the most champions that ever spend more TV time. If I'm being perfectly honest. Um, but yeah, I digress. Roman became the world heavyweight champion. Night two and overall was a 8.4. I'm being honest. It was an 8.4. So yeah. I'm gonna try to get to the other two quickly as possible. Um, Raw, the Raw after Mania. Raw kicked off with Obafemi opening. He didn't really do much besides come out to this music, stand in the middle of the ring, and says the ruler is here and left. And the fans went wild and left and went quiet. Then there was the first match of Kyrie and Io versus Asuka and Kyrie. Let me reset that. You have Rhea and Io versus Kyrie and Asuka. That was the first match where you have Rio winning. Um, Before Rhea goes to SmackDown because now she's the world champion. Then you had the backstage segment between Penta and Javon, and then Ethan Page makes his Raw debut, basically talking trash to Javon Evans and Adam Pearce, making an official of a match between the two later on that night. Then there was a in-ring segment with Cody and Punk. Punk feeling like he's a no, Cody feeling like he's a loser, and CM Punk was like, my time as champion came and left. Made fun of Roman and his older father, basically calling it a bell pepper necklace, which was crazy. Um, but yeah, saying like you never know when an opportunity for a champion might happen. It might fall out of the blue. Who knows? Basically, in the ways most people uh perceived it, like he was going to go after Cody's because of the eye injury or whatever the case might be. Who knows? But yeah, that was that segment, and they kind of went back and forth, and then Cody was telling Punk, whenever you want the fight, let me know when and where. That's all. Then there was a match between Javon and Ethan Page. Ethan Page ended up winning with the help of Rusev because Rusev felt like Javon was the reason why he didn't win the ladder match at Mania. Um, Eventually, Penta came out to help Javon, and Ethan Page got involved, and basically Rusev beat up both Penta and Javon. Then there was the Live celebration with Judgment Day and Ruka coming out and making her Raw debut. Um, Having a segment with Liv. She brought up the Royal Rumble, even though she said Battle Royal instead of Royal Rumble, but I digress. Liv ended up winning that match via interference and a spear from Zarya because of the feud they got going on or had going on. Uh, then you had Paul Heyman who went on a rant about Brock, saying that get Brock out the current and put him in forever. I don't know if he's hinting at the fact that Brock is retired and that, get him out of the current, put him in forever like you did everybody else type of thing. As well as went on a rant with Seth Rollins. Um, Braun Breaker came out after that. Said a couple of words. Seth Rollins came out, attacked all three from behind. They all eventually three jumped him. Braun Breaker got busted open from the back of the head. You had basically Theory and Logan Paul. Theory and Logan Paul jumping on stuff until the Street Profit made their Raw return, helping out Seth Rollins with Logan Paul and Theory, and then basically leaving Seth to be defend for himself. Basically, got beat up by Braun Breaker. Um, then there was a Liv and Rhea backstage moment of basically saying they see each other down the line. Mr. Midnight of Champions, but nevertheless, then there was a Fan versus JD match. Fan won that one. Dom attacked Fan after it. Roman was the closing segment, coming out to celebrate his winning the World Champion with the Usos behind him. And then he basically established who would he face next or whatever. And Jacob Fatu ended up coming out basically telling Roman that he got next, that he want to face him at Backlash. And Roman tell him like, you think you can handle the pressure of what it takes to be a world champion? That is very demanding. Basically, it's saying that if you can, he don't have no doubts that Jacob can beat him or not. He said that he's gonna give him a week. He giving Jacob a week to think about it before coming back on next week Raw to give him his answer. Saying that if you beat me, cool, but if you can't, you have no choice but to acknowledge me. Basically. But yeah, that was the closest segment. And then there was a SmackDown after Mania. The Usos and Jacob opened the show. Basically, Jacob responding to Roman. And then the Usos talking to Jacob. Solo coming out as Solo normally would. Telling the Usos what can Roman do that he can't do, and whatever the case might be, that he was part of a family, that he can guarantee him being champion or whatever. And basically empty promises that we know is full of shit. Tommy ended up telling Soul that Jacob can't even beat Roman. Well, Jacob can't beat Roman, let alone Solo. So that was the indication where that was a match that set up for the end of the night. Then you had the Paige and Brie come out. They had their little segment moment of reflecting on WrestleMania and Paige's return. Eventually, Charlotte and Alexa come out. That was the match between the two. I don't know if it's for the champion or not for the champion. I'm not sure. But then you had Fatal Influence make their SmackDown debut, basically attacking both all four women in the ring. Basically ushering in a new era. I hate that word sometimes. Of the women's tag team division. After that, you had the Cody segment. Cody talking about Randy and how Randy is it's not in the ring at the moment and how he's hiding or some shit like that. So it's like he was basically showing the eye injury without the glasses or the black eye. And some other stuff I really didn't pay attention to too much, if I'm being honest. Trick celebrating his celebration segment in the middle of the ring, him and Lil Yachty and the gingerbread man, which I fucking knew that it was the gingerbread man was Sami Zayn, because brother couldn't dance for shit. He was way off beat, so you know it wasn't a brother underneath that one. I mean, it wasn't a brother before, but still, you know it wasn't a brother in that one. Sami can't dance for shit. He always been offbeat. So I knew it was him from the beginning. And so eventually it showed that he was indeed the gingerbread man. Basically taking out both Trick and Yachty. I believe Danhausen had a match, but it's running blank on my mind. I don't know if it was against Kit Wilson or Miz or somebody. I don't know. Sorry, because that at that moment I really cared. I really didn't care too much about Danhausen. I mean, I never I was never a fan of Danhausen ever since he came in at I think Elimination Chamber if I'm not mistaken. Because yeah, I think ever since you started cursing the wrong people, it's like until you do right by me, no. uh, Nevertheless, let's get back into it. Then there was a segment in the ring with Rhea, who not only reflected her match against Jade, basically dressing the women's in the locker room, basically opened up a open challenge to whoever wanted to face her for the title to step up. And Jessie Jane of Fatal Influence came out along with the other two girls and basically introducing herself to the universe where she was getting a dominant treatment for crazy. Like they was blowing the shit out of her to the point where you could barely hear her. So, but yeah, which would end up leading into a match of Jessie Jane versus Rhea Ripley in a match. Um, the match ended in a disqualification with Fallon Henley or whatever her name is interfering and causing disqualification, which ended up Rhea getting elbow shot to the face by Jessie Jane, getting put out. Then there was Tiffany versus Julia for Women's United States Champion, which again, this is a side eye moment to me because one, you failed to build Julia up as they did in her and in NXT. And it's kind of like people barely even remember that she was United States champion because she mostly was off the TV than she was on the TV, and you're not building her up as the United States champion like how you did with Becky and them on the Raw. And it's kind of like that's slap in the face of Julia to not only have her there, but to also to have her to not only lose to Tiffany and have Tiffany become champion, but still, and it's kind of like what the fuck, bro. She had just as much popularity and a run as Stephanie did. Stephanie Valkyrie. But again, I don't know if that's Triple H or TKO's fault for that. Who knows? Maybe they don't got enough faith in her, which is crazy. Because they like the case you could have kept her in NXT or some shit. You know what I mean? I don't know if you're trying to usher her into the tag team division as well. So you took the belt off of her. But giving it to Tiffany as well. You could have gave it to anybody. Again, I digress. Then there was the Truth and Damian Priest versus Tama and JC Mateo for the tag team champions. Basically, our Truth and Damian Priest retain, and they're still tag team champions. And then there was a match between Solo versus Jacob Fatu, which was the main event, which MFC's got involved. Bachelor doing Bachelor things and botched the whole table incident of falling off the table when he was supposed to stay his ass on the table. But it is what it is. Basically, Jacob telling the Usos that I don't need your help. I can do this by myself, and which he did. And basically, to take out the MFTs himself and beat Solo in a match. So yeah, and telling the Usos that he coming from Roman next week. So yeah, I'm here for it. And then let's talk about the big elephant in the room this past week. This past week was some bullshit. This past week, WWE announced several releases from the company, which we knew was going to come because it's kind of like inventory. After WrestleMania, You have a lot of call ups as well as a lot of releases, which is crazy to me. And it's crazy to me because the people who they let go, that bugs me. They let go Abba Fire, who was part of Chelsea's Secret Harvest. They let go Alistair Black on a year or the day before the anniversary he returned, which is again is crazy work. They let go Andre Chase from Chase U from NXT, which is crazy. But then again, I understand because then Apollo Cruz, they let go Apollo Cruz, which is crazy too. They let go the whole entire Wyatt Six. They let go Bo Dallas, Dexter Loomis, Eric Roman, Joe Gacy, Nikki Cross. Like crazy work. Um, Somebody named Chris Island from Developmental. They let go fucking Kyrie. I think one thing that irritates me more it was Kyrie. They let go Kyrie Sane in the middle of a fucking storyline that she's currently a part of with Oscar EO. And it's kind of like y'all dropped the ball on that one. Y'all let her go. Then you let go uh Luca, who was part of the D'Angelo family. Um Malachi from NXT. You let go Motor City Machine Guns, Alex Shelley, and Chris Sabian, which is diabolical because they just got through winning. What was that? A match a month, a couple of weeks ago, and then was in the current storyline with fucking Johnny Gargano. Like crazy work. They let go of Santo Escobar, who is injured from AAA, which is crazy. Um, they let go Tyra May Steele, who was like the who was the guy from Quarter Catch Crew, the one with the Afro him. She was his tag team partner last time you saw her on Eva on TV. They let her go. She's the one with the braids, the red, white, and blue. They let her go. They let go the tag team, the other two tag teams, who was like the big, bulky version of, uh, I guess like it's like OTM, but it's not OTM. But they was with Wesley before Wesley got let go. They was with him. They let go. They finally let those two go, which I feel like they're gonna end up on TNA because they spend most of their time on TNA anyways. They let go Selena Vega with her husband, and they let go Tony Storm. I mean, not Tony Storm. Zoe Starks, who just got medically cleared to come back after her leg or knee injury, which is diabolical work. And it's like that's wild. That's wild work. Also let go Dante Chang, who is part of NXT as well. But yeah, it's like, I guess, and I get that you have to let go of certain people in order to bring other people up to the main roster. But still, I digress. Because you still had Aleister Black and Zelina in part of a semi storyline being basically doing the Karrion Cross thing of being the Hill Whisperer. But I think the most one that bothered me was the Wyatt Sick, as well as Kari and the Motor City Machine. That's all. But yeah, I'm like, it's more releases coming. So who knows how that was gonna go? Hopefully nobody do what I like. They do that too. But again, I digress. But yeah, I think that's my recap of the moment. Sorry, it's in there almost 50 minutes of video, but it is what it is. Thank you. Until next time, thank you for watching the Butterfly Throne or listening to the Butterfly Throne podcast. I'm your girl Star. And until we meet again.